Hello, and welcome to the Professional Pivot. I'm your host, Maggie Ruby, and I would like to thank you all for joining us. I would also like to take a moment and introduce once again our special guest, Todd Nakasone, who is a former colleague that I had the privilege of partnering with at Warner Brothers and Time Warner, who now leads his own talent acquisition team at a major entertainment company. Welcome back, Todd.
Hey, Maggie, good to be with you again.
Todd, I have really been looking forward to this conversation as we will be focused on today pulling together everything that we previously discussed to help teams create or enhance their own customized in-house executive search playbook. So with that said, we shared that we are calling this three-part series the Game Changer Series, and we will be focusing on the elements of building world-class internal executive search functions. So as a reminder to everybody, for this series, it's a very broad audience, from heads of talent acquisition to CHROs, HR executives, CFOs, COOs, and to CEOs, as this internal strategy not only impacts a company's most valuable asset, which is its talent, but it also has a direct financial impact on a company's bottom line. So very, very quickly, I'd like to provide a recap. Part one was focused on building a search model from a blank piece of paper, drawing from Time Warner and Warner Brothers experiences. Part two was focused on re-engineering a function that already exists, drawing from IBM experiences where the search function was positioned for tremendous opportunities to develop and enhance and scale its model. Today's episode, part three, we are calling the playbook. We will focus on universal keys to success to have a world-class internal executive search function. So with that said, welcome to the final episode of the Game Changer series. Todd, are you ready to dive back into this exciting world?
Yes, Maggie, and I'm so happy to be with you talking about this today. So if you don't mind, let's dive straight into part three of three, the blending of two in-house scenarios into one playbook. So in this series finale, we will be sharing success factors, essential tools, metrics that matter, and strategic moves that make an internal executive search function truly indispensable, and ultimately creating a unique customized playbook that is perfectly designed to support your business goals and objectives.
That is perfectly framed. So we've talked about building models from scratch, and we've talked about re-engineering for enhancements and scalability. And today, what I want to do is step back from both of those stories and share with you the principles for success, the things that are critical to have in your model, regardless of where you're starting from. So in other words, understanding the universal lessons and elements that are important to capture in whichever type of model you create. And interestingly enough, your model might actually be a blend of the two. I would say that this episode is the most practically actionable of the three-part series.
Yeah, so this is the episode I've been waiting for because it's what I really need in creating the playbook. So let's start with what you believe are the non-negotiable success factors. What does a world-class internal executive search function always have to have that an average one does not?
So I believe that there are, in my opinion, three must-haves. And those must-haves are, the first one, and I think is the most critical, is designing the right infrastructure. And I can't emphasize how critical this step is in terms of being able to lay your foundation. And if this doesn't happen, it would be best compared to building a house foundation. It flat out won't stand. So this foundation is based on the analysis, which we outlined in great detail in both part one and part two of the series. The data collected most literally almost always builds the structure itself. This becomes the infrastructure to build a scalable model to support your company's business goals and objectives. And it essentially creates a business within a business, similar to creating an in-house boutique search firm. And it is also important to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities within the areas that you create. In the 5+ in-house model build-outs that I've designed in the past, I have found that they all need the following 3 functional areas. The first one is a team of world-class global search professionals. World-class search professionals are critical. And in a perfect world, I always kind of think that the ideal candidate, although it's not critical, is someone that has a combination of having both in-house experience and out-of-house experience. I've had great success with executive search professionals that have just pure outside external experiences and just pure internal. So either way, find the right and the best talent that you can to build your search team. And I would say align them, either have them dedicated to a business unit or business units, or have them have functional expertise, meaning that they're discipline specific, like they are incredibly powerful at finance searches or sales and marketing, for example, or align them by geography. And if you have a global organization, geography is something I would highly recommend that you take a look at. So I think what's important about any team that you put together, pay attention to their areas of expertise and be flexible enough to mold and shift the structure of your alignment of these search professionals to make it make most sense to capitalize on their expertise. And then that ultimately in turn impacts the business in a profound way. And when I talk about search professional world-class teams, I kind of smile because I call these search professionals the rainmakers of the team, as they really are the ones that make things happen. The second functional area that I think is absolutely critical is a search operations function. And that supports streamlined processes, systems, such as the ATS, which is for more mass volume recruiting, and recruiting at, like, say, director level and below, and a contact management tool, which is specifically director level and above. ATSs and contact management tools, as everyone knows, are very, very different. Operation functions also focus on training on those systems for consistency. And one thing that I've learned in my past experiences is that consistency of how systems are utilized is absolutely critical. Because if everybody's using the system in a different way, and then you're trying to extract reports from them, it's going to be almost that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. It's just not going to be able to tell a story. And we all know that reports and stats help you tell your story and market your function. It's also important to have a contact management tool, and I'll give you an example of this. So say I've got a search professional who's going to make a phone call to an executive. The first thing that I would recommend that they do is go into the contact management tool and key in the executive's name and see if somebody else on our team has spoken to that individual. Because if they have, then it's when they call them up, they can say, "Hi, my name is, and I understand that you've previously spoken to so-and-so, and you guys discussed this. I would like to bring another dimension to the conversation and talk to you about XYZ." So I think that this also helps us look very synchronized by being able to tie and have previous conversations that we can rely on. So therefore, it's very, very, very important when you key in information after you've had a conversation with somebody in the contact management tool, that you make it as detailed as possible so that anybody else that's going to read it can play off of it. Or if you continue with conversations, you continue to build valuable, critical information on that potential new candidate, new hire. The operations function also oversees reporting, metrics, and if applicable, internal mobility and onboarding, if those functions happen to roll up into your search model. And I feel like this section is the critical backbone of the function. It gives it its strength. And the last and third functional area, and this one really is a big one, is the research and market intel function. And in my experience, the alignment of researchers should be by discipline so that they have a deep knowledge in specific areas. Pipeline development within those areas of expertise, those disciplines, is imperative for this function to be very, very successful. Where I have seen it fail is where sometimes teams will be put together where they have a researcher that's aligned to one or more recruiters. And you have to just understand that no researcher can be knowledgeable across all areas. So what this does is it creates tremendous duplication. I genuinely believe this area is the jewel of the crown and a true competitive advantage for a company, but it really needs to be structured correctly. So we've got rainmakers, we've got the backbone of the company, and now we've got the jewel of the crown. And all of this really does align to be a competitive advantage for your company. A couple of things to note. Diversity should be integrated into every functional area and every aspect of everything that we do. And another note that I'd like to point out is the model and infrastructure should be reanalyzed on an annual basis to ensure that the model is evolving with the business. This is very, very important, as where I've seen this fail is when a great model is set up, but then it stays stagnant. And the business changes and grows and evolves, but the model stays exactly the same. And inevitably, that model will not be able to provide the deliverables it needs to. And that's usually one of those scenarios where it becomes defunded in a year or so. So make sure you keep the model evolving as the business evolves. And then my second area that I think is absolutely a must-have is it is so important to have a seat at the table. So the reporting relationship ideally should be directly to the CHRO. This is a critical component in transitioning from reactionary to a proactive stance and dramatically reduces ramp-up time of a search and overall time to fill, as well as quality of hire. If you don't have a seat at the table, then you're completely reliant on people being at the table and then translating and passing it along to you. And if they're not really a professional search individual, sometimes they won't pick up on things that could be critical for future planning that we would incorporate into proactive search strategies. So they relay the information, and if, again, they're not trained, they might not pick up on it, and then key elements are completely lost. And what happens is that impacts the ability to plan and anticipate future needs. So it slows everything down. And where I've seen this fail is when the search models are buried too deep in an organization, it will inevitably turn into a transactional department that just fills jobs. And that is completely different than building a business within a business and having an internal search model. And then my third must-have, which I think is very important because it's the ideal framework for your operation, is create a clear menu of services. What are your deliverables? We outlined a lot of that in part 2. And remember, track all of your successes and continually market your wins. One of my favorite reports is a one-pager that became a cumulative report, literally from the beginning of the creation of the function, that lists every placement by division, slap in a logo, make it look really cool, but placements by division, research and intel projects, cost savings, and again, you're accumulating this so that it builds and builds so that you can see how your team and deliverables and successes are growing, which helps you market it. And I would distribute this report on a monthly basis, is what I've done in the past, to senior executives and key stakeholders. That one document made it very, very hard for executives not to really see the tremendous value add that the model was providing. So great marketing, great storytelling. Todd, you have shared with me some of your critical areas that you believe are keys to success. Would you mind highlighting your thoughts on those?
Yes, Maggie, definitely happy to. I do have three as well, actually. The first is strategic positioning, not service positioning. So this function must be positioned as a strategic talent advisory to the C-suite, not just a premium version of the recruiter down the hall. And this starts with a reporting line directly to the CHRO and is reinforced every time the team interacts with a business leader. So if the team is seen as an order taker, they'll be treated as an order taker. The second is dedicated specialization. The people doing executive search must only do executive search. And the third is measurable accountability. The function tracks and publishes its performance against clear KPIs, search cycle times, hiring manager and candidate satisfaction, 12-month retention of executive hires, the quality of hires, diversity, and various cost savings. Without these numbers and metrics, the function cannot defend its value when budgets are reviewed.
Todd, I think all of those are incredibly great and true must-haves. So excellent. Thank you for sharing those. I think the next section when building your playbook that is critical is the following. And you actually even touched on it when discussing measurable accountability. In this category, this has actually been an important staple in every function that I've led and designed, and that has been reporting as its own category in and of itself. It is critical to consistently prove your successes, and these are the metrics that I believe keep the function alive. The first one is critical reporting that I've always relied on, which is biweekly executive search status reports. And this seems pretty straightforward, but this is kind of the devil in the details. So there's a lot of columns in this, and this is what really is important to be able to really understand the activity that's taking place at any given moment in time in your search model in terms of search status. So the biweekly executive search status report, a spreadsheet that includes things such as the current searches that you're working on. So what business unit this search is tied to, the hiring manager, the position title. This is very important. The date that the position was opened. And then another big column is days open. So it's tracking how long it's been open since the search started. The name of the hiring manager, the executive search professional that's working on it, and then active candidate detail. So candidates that are actively attached to that particular search and where they are in the process, and any components of that candidate, whether their salary information, their existing title. It's also very important, and a lot of times this is overlooked. While you're talking to initial candidates, make sure to ask if there's any conflicts of interest that they might have, or if they're under any type of contract that would make a difference in terms of their availability as it relates to start dates. Sometimes that winds up when you fall in love with the candidate and you're ready to make an offer, and then all of a sudden that bubbles up. So those are types of things for candidate activity that I would include in this spreadsheet. I live and breathe this report as it helps define what I call the health of searches, and that really is for the overall department. I'm a highly analytical person, and I've always said, let the numbers tell a story. I kind of emphasized days open is critical, as within that spreadsheet, we set up red flags for any searches that were open more than 60 days. Because if a search is open more than 60 days, something's not working, and it's probably been derailed somehow or another. So we want to take a look at those searches and see if we want to possibly put in new strategies. Take a look at where we've been, maybe new target companies, what level we're going into the organization. or even kind of really step back totally and take a new direction regarding the search strategy as a whole. So days open is critical. So, and you can even extract that out of a spreadsheet and create a 60, 90-day report that are red flags. But again, talking about health of assignments, those are imperative to catch early on, as opposed to a search just being open for a very long period of time and then no conversation happening or new strategic elements added to it. Because what happens, inevitably, the hiring manager is frustrated because it's dragging and dragging and they don't know why. So it gives us an opportunity to jump in very quickly and put it back on track before it becomes a problem. I have always been a big believer, if for some reason that search is put on hold, the clock stops, because that directly impacts time to fill. So when you're at the end doing running reports on time to fill, and if you haven't stopped the clock, because it's no fault of what we've been doing on the search professional side of it as it relates to the search, but the search just was put on hold. Hiring manager maybe was traveling, they're rethinking the position or the scope of the position. Stop the clock. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation in companies whether they should do that or not. I'm a big believer in stopping the clock so that the time to fill truly is an accurate representation of how long the search has taken to get to successful completion. Make sure to do weekly search updates with the hiring manager. And this is one that's always been important to me, to touch base maybe every Friday, pick a day of the week, whatever's convenient for the hiring manager, but touch base, even if there's no significant information to report. But the last thing that you ever want to have happen is the client, the hiring manager, reaching out to you to see, okay, where are we with the search? You never want them to chase you. You always want to be really driving the updates and the reports. And like I said, even if you don't have an update, it lets them know that this is high priority for you and you're working on it. It also gives you a chance to have a conversation with the hiring manager where you can also gather additional information, talk about anything that's new that's happening in their world. Again, more information that you can just pick up on for anticipation of maybe potential future searches down the road. So as we're talking about reports, one other report that I want to highlight that I think is incredibly important is a search strategy document. The information for the document is gathered at the beginning of the search during the search strategy meeting, not the intake meeting because we're changing our vocabulary, but during the search strategy meeting. And it's a template that I've created, and it allows similar questions. So we're all, as search professionals, asking the hiring manager the same exact questions in terms of what they're looking for in the ideal candidate. And it takes place during the search strategy, again, at the very beginning of the search, the kickoff meeting. And during that, you make a commitment that you're going to gather all this information and guarantee to the hiring manager that within 24 to 48 hours, you're going to flip that document completed back to them for their review and sign off. And it includes basic things, details of the assignment, the interview team that you guys during that meeting decide are important to have as part of this process. And again, selecting the interview team at the beginning, I think, is very, very important. Creating a position specification, essentially a job description, listing target companies, very important, a detailed breakdown of the timing of activities that will be happening during the search. So you break out, like during week 1, we're going to be doing targeted company outreach. Week 2, we're going to be identifying and interviewing candidates. Week 3. So what it does is it gives the hiring manager an expectation of what happens, what we'll be doing week by week, so that they understand the flow. And it also is a great marketing tool because it shows the level of complexity that goes into and the amount of attention that we're paying on the search in order to have a successful completion for that search assignment for that hiring manager. And this document is very important, and this I cannot stress enough. The reason this document is so important is that it allows you to be able to be ensured that you and the hiring manager are on the same page regarding the search and the search criteria from the very beginning. You certainly can modify the document as the search progresses, but in so many instances, I have seen searches just completely get derailed if everybody is not in agreement and on the same page from the very beginning. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes you have a kickoff meeting, you think you understand what the hiring manager is looking for, so the hiring manager is going to expect this type of candidate that you present, and the search professional is off in a different direction and targeting wrong companies, wrong candidates, et cetera. And then it just absolutely gets derailed. And this gives, by having agreement at the very beginning, it allows the search to have an opportunity to start fresh and really be aligned from the very, very get-go. And oftentimes what happens is that if you're not on the same page, there certainly is something that's been derailed. But catch it ahead of time and not wait until all of a sudden you're down the road into week 2, 3, 4, 5 of the search, and the candidates you're presenting are just completely off base. So this is a very, very, very important document, in my opinion.
Yes, I think all these reports are very critical to have and just to stay aligned with the search and the hiring manager. I would also like to add tools and technology to the conversation. So if I'm standing up or reengineering this particular function, what do I absolutely need? And what separates a world-class operation from one that's just getting by?
That's a great question. And regarding technology for executive search, I believe you cannot operate a search function without a very superior contact management tool, a CRM, which is very, very, very different, as I mentioned before, and most of you all know, is very different than an ATS. Sophisticated contact management tools today do remarkable things. They not only do the basics, which is allowing search professionals to keep detailed notes on candidates, which I gave several examples before, but it also houses pipelines of talent for proactive contact outreach. But it can generate unlimited reports that are just so sophisticated. That's very, very impressive with sharing with the hiring manager in terms of the search status updates. They can extract and do some of the most incredible reporting, the presentations. They can also do logos in terms of PowerPoint presentations that tell a story. So the reporting capabilities they've just changed dramatically and enhanced over the course of time. But status updates and being able to share this with senior management in terms of overall accomplishments is very important to get out there. Again, it's all about telling your story. And it can also push information out to candidates. It can pull in communications. It can create org charts, and that's great competitive intel. And it just does so much more. So that would be numero uno on my list in terms of technology for executive search functions, a superior CRM. And I believe that the methodology for executive search is very personally driven and very hands-on. However, I do believe that AI can be a supplement to incorporate into the research and market intel function, as it can expand the boundaries of reach as you're identifying candidates and target companies and dramatically speed up the deliverables. But I would highly emphasize that verification of all information gathered via AI needs to be vetted, as bad information can completely derail the whole process of a search and can impact credibility very quickly. So if you use it, please use AI wisely. One of the things I've always been so proud of in any of the in-house models that I've created, that, remember I told you the research function, I believe, was the jewel of the crown. And I would always say that I'd put any of those research teams up against any research function in any of the large search firms or boutique search firms for that matter. The information was impeccable. And so when a search professional would work with a researcher and they get a list, all of the information was always vetted and accurate. So when they were calling or sending emails, so the quality information in research is critical for the success of searches and for credibility and for expediting the activities that the search professionals do when they're embarking on a search. And in terms of other tools and strategies, I would add department repurposing as a component into the playbook. And I believe that it is a critical element and can easily be done if the model is scalable. I used to always say you want a model where you can flex and redeploy as needed based on the business. And so businesses don't just run linear. There's changes that inevitably happen. So if you have a scalable structure that you can flex and repurpose roles within the organization, and again, I mentioned at the very beginning, it's important when you're doing creating the infrastructure that there's very defined roles and responsibilities, but being able to shift and move some of those responsibilities or create new responsibilities as needed as the business shifts and moves, then it's important because then you stay relevant as the company evolves and changes or is focused on a specific project. Your function isn't stuck in just a stagnant or static structure. It's able to evolve and start supporting as the business is shifting in different directions. So for example, if the company is doing layoffs, they are often downsizing one area, but oftentimes they're building out and investing in another area. And that's when you can shift areas of responsibility during that time to then refocus the lens and help build out the new area and support internal talent, finding new roles within the organization. So even if they're incorporated in the layoff or the targeted layoff, and they're such talented individuals that you don't want to lose from the company, you can shift and start playing a role in helping them find other opportunities within the company, kind of like an in-house outplacement service, if you will. And again, these are just some examples that I'm throwing out. This is a very powerful example. Even when I've been with a company that has been going through some downsizing, I have never been in a position where I had to downsize my team as a result, because I was able to shift and be able to provide new value and repurposing of my team's roles during those times. And another thing to do is add new services to your mix. So add internal mobility as a new component, unless that's already part of your structure and your infrastructure as is. Add succession planning if it doesn't already exist. And succession planning is interesting. Be part of an internal benchmarking practice so that you play a role in the internal succession planning, like internal talent reviews, for example, and then offer up being able to supplement it with external candidates in the event there are no identifiable internal successors. So you do a talent review and you have succession planning. And for example, you've got multiple business units and you've got a gap in a marketing role for backfill in terms of succession planning and marketing. But one of the other business units, you do have somebody, then you can also play a role in identifying that individual and shift them over into a different business unit as a potential successor. And if there's just nobody that's identifiable, then you can start gathering external candidates to supplement the internal succession planning efforts. And a lot of companies don't provide that as a service. And I think that positions that internal executive search function in a very powerful way. And constantly be intellectually curious and keep creating new ways to take the function to new heights. I used to always have fun when we would do year-end recaps and talk about the successes of the internal team. And then we say, wow, we really accomplished a lot. How on earth are we going to top it next year? And then inevitably we do. And that's because we're always thinking of new ways to reinvent ourselves or add new functions and take things to new heights. So I'll tell you a fun example of a story where that took place. I had an idea of working with our internal acquisitions department, our M&A group. And what happens within the M&A group is they target companies that the company wants to invest in or acquire. And inevitably, they're going to want to restructure the top of the house. And what they typically do is go to external search firms to replace the senior executives. So I put together a business plan and met with the mergers and acquisitions team and said, look, when you make an acquisition, you're going to typically restructure the top of the house. And they agreed. And I said, and then you're paying a search firm 33 and a third retainer in order to do that. I'll offer 15%, and we will anticipate the acquisition, go into those local markets, especially if it's global, identify key competitors and key talents, and then we will help restructure the top of the house at half the price that you would pay an external search firm. And we had several examples of success stories where we actually went in and restructured the top of the house. And we created for the first time a revenue stream for corporate. So again, those aren't typical offerings that internal search models, it's part of their menu of services, but think out of the box. Think of new ways to bring value add and impact the bottom line in the company in terms of what your model and your in-house business within a business can provide the company. One additional item to mention that I believe is very important is to ensure you have very clear executive search goals and objectives. So everybody is pointing to the same North Star. The search goals and objectives should align with the HR's goals and objectives and ultimately tie to the company's goals and objectives. I believe the same should be also aligned with vision and values. I also like to collectively create mission statements for our teams, as that not only unifies the team, but it becomes great sound bites while marketing the department. And lastly, I would add networking as a whole category in terms of importance of offerings within your executive internal model. Participate and have a presence at conferences and events, and participate in speaking engagements and panels. This is terrific for the company's brand as an employer of choice, as well as it helps create and further develop your own personal brand. Please remember that relationships that are built in person compound faster than any digital outreach can. Todd, I have always been impressed with your knowledge of technology. Would you mind providing our listeners with some examples of specific tools that you've either used in the past or understand them to be highly respected in the market that can help support, from a technology standpoint, internal search opportunities?
Sure, no, happy to include my technology stack for our listeners. I think first and foremost, you need to have a LinkedIn recruiter seat or seats for your team. It's a foundational sourcing and relationship management tool. And now it's expanded to new features such as utilizing it for storytelling, not just updated resumes and CVs. Another tool that's very important is to have market intelligence tools like Zoom Info or Boardroom Insider for executive level intel, org charting, and even compensation benchmarking. Another area is executive compensation benchmarking tools such as Radford or Mercer to provide compensation data at the senior level, as well as news and signal monitoring. So services such as Owler, Google Alerts for tracking executive moves, company restructuring, and talent availability in real time is super important. Also, you want to have an internal analytics dashboard, which is a live view of all your open sources, pipeline health, time in each particular stage, and cost avoidance metrics accessible to the CHRO as well as various key executives around the company. And I think the most important piece of the technology stack is your talent CRM. Tools such as Encore, Bullhorn, Salesforce CRM, which is customized for talent, Clockwork, and Microsoft Dynamics. These are great examples of relationship-based technologies.
These are so important, and I really appreciate you taking the time to outline, very specific tools. I think, technology has changed so much over the course of time that we really can leverage technology in a way we never have in executive search. The categories and the examples that you gave of specific tools, I think is tremendously helpful to our listeners. So thank you very much for sharing that information. I think that was a very comprehensive list, incredibly helpful. And I'm sure that really is going to help internal teams everywhere.
So Maggie, across these 3 episodes, you've given our listeners more practical insight to internal executive search than most people ever get in their whole entire career. But I'd like to end with this. Why does it matter? Why should a TA leader fight so hard to build this internally?
I love that question, actually. I wholeheartedly believe that when dealing with our most important asset, which is the company's talent, it should not, under any circumstances, be outsourced. We should need to and want to own it ourselves. No one knows our business drivers, growth opportunities better than we do. And it's imperative to understand all of that in order to attract the best of the best and most successful candidates. And same goes truly for understanding the culture of the company, and the culture as a whole, as well as nuances of each specific department. This is all critical for the best and identifying candidates for the best fit. You can have a candidate that has incredible technical competencies, but if the fit doesn't match, no matter how smart they are or technically competent and talented they are, it won't be successful long term. And I think another thing that's very interesting is we have an advantage being internal of knowing about opportunities in advance, so we can proactively organize and launch a search extremely quickly. We have a vested interest in ensuring we hire the best talent, as we have a stake in the success of the company. So this isn't about somebody coming in to do business development, place an individual and get a retainer fee and moving on to the next opportunity. We have a vested interest in the company. So we therefore want to ensure that the best of the best is hired to impact and make our company even that much more successful. So when a company owns its executive talent capability, it owns its future. When it doesn't, the company is perpetually dependent on someone else's judgment as it relates to the important decisions being made. This is the competitive advantage. This is the game changer. And in my humble opinion, this is why it matters. So in closing, if you've listened to all 3 episodes of our series and you're a TA leader ready to make your move, here's your action plan. Pull your retained search spend from the last 12 months. Identify your champions and get buy-in. Do a comprehensive analysis and let the numbers tell a story. And build the right infrastructure and foundation that is appropriate for your company. One size does not fit all. Establish relationships, earn trust and credibility quickly at all levels, create a mission statement, and establish clear annual goals and objectives for your team. Tie search strategy to business strategy. Choose your first flagship search and have a spectacular win. Build your tool stack, publish your SLAs, and market your menu of services. And don't forget, measure and track everything. So now you have your playbook and the components of a very successful playbook that's customized for you and your company. So now the only thing left to do is to use it. So I'm rooting for every single one of you. And when you build something extraordinary, I would love to hear about all of your successes. And one last thing, as a team, please remember that shoulder to shoulder you stand and united you win. There is strength in an individual, but extraordinary power of the whole. And while you're doing all of these incredible things, don't forget to have fun. I sincerely and genuinely hope this episode and examples were helpful in terms of designing and building your business within a business, essentially your in-house search firm. Todd, I want to thank you very much for everything. And I hope everyone has a terrific rest of your day. And please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Until next time.